In the first reading today from the 15th chapter of Luke, Jesus is telling three parables about God's mercy. And the first lesson is about the prodigal son. And it kind of hit home with me because at one point I came to my father and asked for a loan against my inheritance. It didn't go well. So as you hear today's reading, think about the dynamics going on between the father and son. Jesus said there was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So the father divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent them to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to share? But here I am, dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found.' And they began to celebrate." Blessings upon our understanding of this reading. The second lesson this morning is from the book of Isaiah. And the prophet Isaiah speaks of a renewed vision for the return of the exiles and of the restoration of the land as promised by God. "Oh, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourself in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen, so that you may live. I will make you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. See, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and a commander of the peoples. See, you shall call nations that you do not know, and nations that do not know you shall run to you, because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, is glorified you."
When I think about hunger, there are two images that come to my mind. The first is probably the most famous image of a person that comes out of the Dust Bowl. It is a picture of a woman named Florence Thompson. The image was made by photographer Dorothea Lange in 1936, and she called this image Migrant Mother. In 1960, Lange remembered what happened as she made this picture. I saw and approached the hungry and desperate mother as if drawn by a magnet. I do not remember how I explained my presence or my camera to her, but I do remember she asked me no questions. I made 5 exposures, working closer and closer from the same direction. I did not ask her her name or her history. She told me her age. She was 32. She said that they had been living on frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and birds that the children killed. She had just sold the tires from her car to buy food. There she sat in their lean-to tent with her children huddled around her. The other image that comes to mind for me is not nearly as specific or as moving as this image. It's a contemporary image, not from 90 years ago. It's an image that comes to my mind of a grade school aged child sitting in a school lunchroom without any food. This image is so non-specific that when I went hunting on the internet for an image that might represent this generalized image in my head, I couldn't find one because they kept looking like specific children. And this image that I have is the every child. And so it can't be any specific child. Still, this contemporary child in my mind's creation got me thinking about numbers. I'm a numbers guy. If you want to blame somebody, you gotta blame my dad. The United States Department of Agriculture defines food secure households as being households that have had access at all times to enough food for an active, healthy life for all household members. In 1923, 86.5% of American households were considered food secure, which means that 13.5% of American households were not food secure. In other words, at some point, and potentially all year long, 18 million US households did not have enough access to enough food for an active, healthy life for all members of their household. 18 million American households in 1 year at some point did not have access to enough food. That statistic means that in our congregation there are people who have or are experiencing food insecurity at some point in their lives. If we look at households with children in 2023, the percentages shift with a smaller percentage of households being food secure. It goes down to 82.1%. This left 6.5 million households with children in the food insecure category. In some of these food insecure households, only adults were facing food insecurity because they made sure the children had food. That meant the adults would sometimes be skipping meals. Of those 16.5 million households, they represent 7.2 million children. I know it's easy to be overwhelmed by the numbers, but I've got 3 more that I want to share. These are from the organization No Kid Hungry. 1/3 of the 18 million food insecure households had incomes at or above 185% of the federal poverty income levels. 185%, nearly twice poverty levels. They were earning enough money to make it hard to be eligible for programs to decrease food insecurity. Families in the lowest income levels spend on average over 1/4 of their annual income on food. When I was growing up, my mom was trying to teach me something about budgeting. She said, well, you should plan on 30% of your expenses to be for housing. These families are spending almost 30% of their income on food. If the kids in households needed to skip a meal during the year because the food wasn't available, that would make the household a food insecure household. 29% of families that fell into this category in 2023 in the United States reported that it happened almost every month. All of these statistics are the result of policies. Let me offer two examples. In 2021, while our country was reeling from the pandemic, the federal government adopted economic security programs that drove the poverty rate down to a record low of 8%. The expiration of that aid drove poverty back up in 2022 to 12.4%. The number of people living in poverty fell from 14.5 million between 2019 and 2021 and rose back up to 14.5 million in 2022 because those programs ended. Part of the American Rescue Plan was an expansion of the Child Tax Credit Program and implementation of stimulus payments. They, in conjunction with other relief measures, spurred the largest one-year drop in child poverty on record in 2021. In 2022, when those programs expired, the aid ending led to the biggest increase in child poverty in U.S. history. As a result, 5 million more children live in poverty in 2022 compared to 2021. Poverty and hunger in the United States are policy choices. Now, all these images of hunger, all these statistics about hunger in the United States stand in stark contrast to the image that Isaiah lifts up in the passage that we heard today. Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you that have no money, come, buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. These words of hope come from Isaiah just as the Persian Empire is awakening, and with it, the possibility of the end of the Babylonian exile. Here in these 3 lines of poetry, the exiles are 3 times invited. Come, come, come. Come to the water, come to the banquet, come without money. Don't take what has value and waste it on nothing. Don't settle for what doesn't feed. Take only what is good. This strange economy that Isaiah articulates stands in stark contrast to Jeremiah's lament in Lamentations 5. Our inheritance has been turned over to strangers, our homes to aliens. They have become orphans, fatherless. Our mothers are like widows. We must pay for the water we drink, and wood we get must be bought. Those who lost their heritage to encroaching foreigners are forced to pay money for their own natural resources. Fuel and even water has become a commodity. Harsh realities faced by the generations of conquered, exiled people were caused by Babylonian policy. And the result of those policies make Isaiah 55's words a promise of free water, free milk, free food, and free wine all the more moving. There are so many who need these words of hope today. As of the end of 2023, there are over 117.3 million people around the globe who've been forcibly displaced from their homes, typically by war, violence, or disaster. About 58% of them have been internally displaced, meaning they were forced from their homes and still remain within their country's borders. The others are refugees and asylum seekers. And we know that war is a leading cause of famine. Just look at the recent histories of South Sudan and Yemen and Gaza. Of course, exile can be caused by factors other than international geopolitics and warring factions. Children are exiled from their families by their parents for becoming pregnant, or because they chose to have an abortion to end a pregnancy, or because they were honest about being LGBT or Q. Judgmentalism in the church has caused massive numbers of spiritual refugees. Inaccessibility can lead to unintended exiles, and shame can lead to self-imposed exiles. As real and important and basic as the hunger for food is and water is, there are other hungers that people have as well, that we have. The hunger for love, the hunger for joy, the hunger for belonging. These hungers are just as real and just as deserving of the hope of the Isaiah passage, the passage from Luke. I think the parable of the prodigal son can be seen appropriately as a story of exile and return. The son chooses to go into exile, to go see the world, and returns home again. And the father could have been singing as he ran to his lost child, "Come, come, 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 for you are love. Come, share my joy. Come, for you belong." We need visionaries like Isaiah who tell us to come. It is the poets who during droughts can imagine streams in the deserts and point the way there. During political chaos, it is poets who imagine swords being beaten into plowshares, inspiring us to see a demilitarized world. During generations of runaway wealth alongside horrifying poverty, it is poets and prophets who envision every valley exalted and every mountain and hill laid low, the crooked made straight and the rough places plain. So ordinary people can remember that our present reality is neither normal nor right, and can envision and build something better. And so I invite you to envision and build something better. I invite you to spend some time imagining together a world without hunger, and to imagine how our church can continue to make it a reality.